Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Scott, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks, Eric, for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for the people listening, can you do a quick intro, kind of who you are and what you do and what we'll be talking about a little bit today? And then we'll hop into the I don't even know. It's not annual is not the right word, and neither is daily, but the episodial question from the last guest, and we'll hop right into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, my name's Scott Bowen. I'm in the real estate world, real estate agent, real estate investor, and I do a lot of real estate coaching for people who are looking to get into investments, real estate investments, primarily single family house investments and small multifamily investments and things like that. So that's what I do now. I spent 12 years in the commercial real estate world, left that business to start a nonprofit around 2011 and did that for 5 to 6 years. And then now I'm back in real estate, but still involved with the nonprofit. So I'm excited to, unearth all that. I think that'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So so shout out to Rick for sending me a gazillion questions. Go back and watch his episode, people listening, if you haven't already. He's a crazy, interesting guy. Um, hmm, Trying to decide. Well, we can ask both. Actually, the other one I'm sure we'll get to later. So we'll start with this one. Do you have a moment or event that profoundly shifted your perspective going forward?
Yeah, I think we'll jump into this. I'm sure as we talk about the story or my story. Um, I believe it was 2006. Someone invited me to a trip to Zambia, Africa. Zambia is a country in kind of sub-Saharan Africa. And I remember the first day that I was there, the first 24 hours essentially changed my life. The trajectory and the course and the and just the events that followed that profoundly changed my life in general. So um we can dive into more of that, but that's the moment.
Mm. How did you end up th Was it for like how did you end up there? Or like let's backtrack to maybe like high school type age. So obviously you get your real estate. Where did the interest in that stem from? Was that something that you always wanted to go into, or did you just kind of like stumble on that?
Yeah, I had some family involved in real estate, and so it was kind of an easy, natural path to kind of just get involved in it. It wasn't something I didn't get into real estate for the idea of I want to become a real estate investor. I got into real estate because it felt like it was a good kind of W-2 job that made a good income and things like that. Honestly, it wasn't until probably 10, 12 years after I've been involved in the real estate industry did I really become like an investor myself and start investing and buy my own properties and things like that. But I had some introduction to real estate just from family members and things like that, and then got involved with them straight out of college. My degree was actually in construction management. So it's kind of a related, similar degree in terms of, it's building and project management and things like that. And it's just there's some parallels to real estate, but yeah, that's where I ended up.
So, okay, that makes sense. From there, so about how long, so I'm trying to figure out how to weave this in together. So so for those listening, the nonprofit is soccer related. And so was like where along the line was oh, I want to try something different because you then went into commercial real estate, you were doing the single family stuff before, then investing, and so you're touching these different areas of real estate. Where did these two things, ideas, become intertwined in your life and kind of, and I guess what I'm getting at is, and maybe I'm struggling with this a little bit in myself, and I've seen friends kind of struggle with this, where they've got like a side hustle or a project that they want to like take the leap on, so to speak, and say, hey, I'm not going to be in 9 to 5 world anymore. I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. And when was the point that you could like pull the trigger and say, okay, yes, I'm leaving the security net of my safe, good job or whatever the case is, and I'm
Hmm.
going to do this other thing. Because oftentimes to build up a startup, it takes a lot of time and energy, and you're not going to be making that much money in initially. So where was that thought process for you, and kind of what was the origin of this particular nonprofit for how you wanted to go about doing it? Because there could have been a gazillion things that you could have done with soccer. So
Yeah.
I guess there's a lot in that, but like talk through the thought process of where you were in those early years and kind of when the thinking started of I want to do something else maybe.
Yeah. I mean, really, it wasn't, I had nothing on my radar. I definitely think I was bent to some of the nonprofit things. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty compassionate, social aware guy. You know what I mean? So some of those things were just kind of natural in terms of service projects and doing some of the nonprofit things. But it certainly wasn't like this is something I've got to do or I want to pursue until I made that trip to Zambia. And then I think it just kind of opened my eyes in a big way. That experience there, just with the people and the kids and all the things that we discovered on that first trip, and then the subsequent trips as well, kind of reinforced that. But so I probably trying to think now, it was probably 5 or 6 years of me being really involved in another organization, the Zambian organization, and and I noticed like when I would go to work in the mornings, I would spend like the first 2 to 3 hours potentially working on, these things for the nonprofit. And then I'm like, I got to do my real work now. It's like I would have those conversations in my head, but I remember all my focus being in kind of the things I wanted to do were the nonprofit side of things. And then the real estate stuff was kind of the have to do, like because I'm getting paid to do it and people were, relying on me kind of thing. And so I think over years of that and just kind of seeing that pattern of like this is kind of my heart's bringing me over here, but my income is coming from over here and those kind of things. Um, it really started to kind of weigh on me. And then I had a couple of good friends who started asking questions of me and saying like, what is going on with this and what do you want to do with it and what's this going to look like? Like, what's your kind of dream? Because obviously they could tell like I was pretty passionate about what was going on there. And that's really where the soccer thing came in. That's where the idea for the nonprofit that we now have came in. It was really for us just trying to, one of the things that captivated my heart was kind of this middle school to high school age boy who was growing up in this sub-Saharan Africa context that had very little role models in their life, very little good influences, and especially like good male influences in their lives. And so I thought over time and with other people processing all this stuff, but we basically came up with the idea of like, okay, if we can get the kids to come and we can attract them with the ball and a uniform and whatever, is going on with, the field or whatever, that kind of thing. If we can get them to come, we can get them to come, frequently and often and periodically. Then I think we can insert, a male influence. So like a coach, a 25-year-old, 30-year-old or whatever, who lives in their context, who's in this case, we ended up going, that's a whole other story, but we ended up going to Uganda and we left Zambia and ended up starting this in Uganda. But so we were looking for a Ugandan male, 25 to 35 years old, that can kind of just shepherd a group of boys through life, from 8 years old to 16 years old or whatever. And so that's kind of where we started with the idea. And then it's kind of grown from there. But essentially, the core of what we do is that like we're focused on that middle school to high school age boy and just kind of walking life with them and just kind of, putting good, faithful, role models in their lives at critical junctures. And that's where it all started.
Did this stem from, did you have friends growing up that you saw like that sort of situation with, or maybe yourself or somebody close to you where you were like, oh, a good like male role model would have been super helpful for this person? Or was it really an eye opener just when you went on that trip?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had those people in my life. I think for me, it was almost like the realization that here's a whole, in my mind, this is not actually true, but in my mind, it was like the whole country needs this. Like it was like a epidemic through the whole country. And like I said, that's not necessarily true. And I learned that over time, but there was a large number of kids that were needed that, you know what I mean? And so I think for me, it was more about I certainly had, I started to have gratitude for the upbringing that I did have, the role models I did have. I had a lot of good, good people in my life, had parents that were invested in my life. And so when I saw the people who didn't have that, then I'm like, wow, like they need that. Like I feel like this is something that they need and something that would be beneficial. And so that's where really it kind of started from that perspective more than anything else. It was like just seeing like a need because of the stark difference between how I was brought up and the people who were invested in my life versus what they had. So that was a big key to it.
Can you talk to kind of when you decided to make the leap into saying, okay, I'm not doing real estate, at least for the time being. You mentioned you went back into it, of course.
Yeah.
Um, like financially, what you're looking at in terms of, did you have markers that you were like, okay, I need to have this much saved here and this much saved here and this paid off of that before I quit this? Or like or was it kind of just, you know what, now's the time and we're gonna do it and see what happens? Or in
Yeah. I mean,
between, I guess.
yeah, it was a little bit of both. I think it was a conversation with my wife that went on for a while and we my firstborn daughter, she was born in 2005. So this was kind of all happening when the kids were super young. Like she was a year old, and then my son was born shortly after, and then we had another. And so the kids were young. I was low 30s. Trying to figure this out, and so there was definitely we had margin based on some deals that we had closed and some things like that, so that we had some comfortability in the short term. We knew and then we just had to figure out like what it looked like and honestly like we all had to kind of be on board with this decision. Not only was a financial constraint, trying to navigate this, we didn't really know how it was going to play out. We didn't know if this was going to be a 1 year thing or a 20-year thing. But the other side of it was the time. Like I knew if we were going to do this, I would be traveling to Africa, to Uganda, 4 to 5 times a year, which is actually what happened. So there's a lot of, travel away from the family and the kids and all that kind of stuff. So we all kind of had to, wrestle with those questions and make sure we're okay. And then after some period of time, my wife and I just kind of agreed, like, I think we should do this. And so we were like, let's just give it a try. Let's go for it. In the nonprofit world, really my first aim was to like raise funds. Like I was like, okay, we need to raise money to kind of seed money to get this thing going and get some progress. And so for me, it was like, let me spend some time really casting the vision to other people who might, jump on board. And we were able to get a couple people early on, and then we added a couple more people. And I don't remember the exact moment. I don't know that it was like, okay, I quit on a Tuesday and then Wednesday, I started this conversations. I think it was probably a lot of those conversations were had before I officially kind of quit. So it gave me the comfortability to say, okay, I think I've got some people on board with this nonprofit thing, and it gave me some comfort to move forward and to do it. So yeah, so I think in summary of all that, even to your earlier question about, when did we know? I think it was a combination and it was just a gradual thing. I think this developed over 4 to 5 years. So I think as more people saw me doing this, even as a side part-time thing, um, people were asking questions and then showing interest, and that gave me the confidence to approach them for funding and things like that that would help us, begin the process.
How was the difference in transition of gaining funding for a nonprofit versus you're trying to get somebody to invest in a real estate project or something like that? Is a very different kind of conversation, I would imagine. Was that a big adjustment for you? Or like how did that kind of work? Because the two worlds are very, very different.
Yeah. They were different, but also I think I leveraged what I knew about real estate and investments and things like that to my advantage during that time. Um, one of our one of our big things starting out, and we actually have executed this, and we can talk about it later. But we essentially wanted to go buy property in Uganda, develop a facility that the kids would use during the day and things like that. And then at night, we would rent it out to local people who were, older guys like you or me or whatever, and bring their buddies. And they would pay by the hour, rent the facility as exercise and just fun. They play basically futsal, based on the size. We didn't know it was going to be futsal, but now it's ended up being that size, pitch. And so I could kind of talk, yes, nonprofit, yes, compassion, these kind of things, but give it more of a business context of saying, okay, this is what we want to do. So the ROI on someone's donation or investment could actually tangibly be seen. To say, okay, if we do this right and we raise the money for the facility, then we believe that it can 100% sustain itself operationally so that we can pay our staff and we can pay for all the programs we want to do with the kids. And so it can sustain itself operationally. So I think that was a similar conversation that I was used to having in terms of real estate and investments and things like that. And it kind of just carried over, which I think it allowed me to attract a different donor than, someone who's just going to maybe give from their heart or give from compassion. It might just be more about, okay, this guy's got some ideas and some business sense that might be kind of cool to invest in and see what happens. And ultimately that did pan out, and we still kind of operate under that premise.
That's a good idea. I mean, that makes total sense. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It also would be easier to attract people to give you money because they could potentially see it back, or they have seen it back. I would say talk to. Okay, so that's super interesting to me. Where did you? So obviously the real estate is comes into okay, yeah, we're gonna buy some land and we're gonna develop this. Where do you go about then finding the people to go build this thing? Where because there's so many, I would imagine, like not that it's like there's a lot of space there, so you could do a lot of different things. How did you settle on like a blueprint of what you actually wanted to put? You could have put, for example, like playgrounds and right, it ended up being futsal. There could have been like a whole bunch of different facilities, and how did you guys go about deciding what to do, like where to put it? And then, because you mentioned you've also moved into Uganda for some level, did you do the same business model there? So I guess like all the conversations that happen about like who's going to be involved, who's going to help build it, where are we building it, why are we building it here, like how are we going to have somebody manage it, right? You're in the U.S. There's somebody in Africa that's going to have to manage it. Like you can't be there all the time. Like
Yeah.
all those sorts of conversations, like how do those occur from the standpoint of I would imagine a lot of it is just kind of learning as you go, but in terms of even like local laws or regulations and things like that of like, oh, you can't build, which I would imagine probably less than here, I would think. But like, how did all that go?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean here again, there was some overlap and totally two different worlds. But if you think about it, you know, I was working with a real estate developer. We would go into new towns, we would develop relationships with local, municipalities or whatever it may be, and figure out how to build whatever we were trying to build from a development real estate perspective in that town. And really, it was no different. It was okay. It's a different town, different country, different culture. A lot of those things, sure, those are different. But a lot of the processes was similar. It's like, okay, we don't know anything. We've got to learn everything. We've got to meet new people. We've got to, and a lot of it was just relationships. And we actually ended up, actually, our first, to kind of fill in the gap of the story, when we set out to do Champions United, it was in Uganda. That was the decision we made. So we never did anything in Zambia. So
Okay.
and the reason we picked Uganda was because we did meet someone who was doing some sports kind of things, who was Ugandan. He was doing sports outreach kind of programs to kids and things like that in Uganda. And so we felt like we could leverage his relationships and kind of leverage his knowledge, obviously, for being there. Um, and so I think we just kind of utilize a lot of the same processes. It's like, okay, we got to build relationships. We got to start somewhere. We leverage this guy that we knew, And then we just started meeting new people, started figuring out the lay of the land, started talking to attorneys, how do we buy land? What does that look like? And it's like, what is, asking people like, do you know anybody who could build, what we want to build? We had to have like a grading company to grade the pitches and all those kind of things. And so it was really just conversations and one thing led to another. And then, there's a lot of things that we did that we don't do anymore because we learned better and, more efficient ways to do things. So we're still growing and evolving in that way, but a lot of it was just relationship building 101 and just talking to people and spending time with people and understanding, how things get done. And like I said, it's a process. It didn't happen overnight, but over the course of time, we got to the level of comfortability where we felt like, yeah, we've got enough, data points to move forward.
That's super interesting. I had three main thoughts when you were giving that one. The first one is that people who are very good at building relationships like often give a similar answer to what you give in terms of like, oh, how did you do this? And you're like, well, it's just, you just talk to people and then somehow it works itself out. And that's super interesting just from a human perspective because you get other people that maybe are not, like I've spoken to people where it's like, yeah, I really had to study about how to talk with somebody, or I was really nervous about this job interview or whatever. Like it's, and then somebody like you might go, oh, it's just a job interview. You just go talk to the person. Like, how hard can it be? And it's super
Yeah.
interesting that it makes complete sense. So I want to push a little bit on one piece. When you meet the guy who's in Uganda, is there any sort of, um, what's the word? Negative pushback from like the local communities, as in like, oh, these people from America are just coming here, we don't trust them, et cetera, et cetera. Like, did you get any of that? And how did you deal with that? Was it just kind of like an okay, well, maybe we build somewhere else, or like, how do you sort through that? Like these people are coming in, they're bulldozing this land to make what they say is going to be a soccer field. We have no idea who they are or what they're doing,
Right. Yeah.
and they don't have to believe us at all. And for somebody like you who can walk into a room in the United States and just be like, yeah, this you just talk to somebody and this is how you get it done and it's no problem and this is like how I make relationships with my real estate stuff. Like for culturally, there's got to be some level of kind of if you didn't experience exactly what I mentioned, but some level of getting around that cultural barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple things. One is I think we learned a lot. Like my years that I worked, and when I say worked, I was a volunteer, but the years that I spent in Zambia doing, helping that organization and those kind of things, um, I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, this idea that Americans are going to solve everybody's problems by coming in and doing it the American way. And that's not the best way to do it at all. So I learned a lot through that. And part of the reason I think we wanted to go into a whole different context or a whole different country even was to kind of start over and to realize, okay, we made a lot of mistakes. Or at least I could say that about myself. I made a lot of mistakes, relationally or this or that. I want to do better. I want to do a different way next time. But when we did launch it and we kind of had this idea, we certainly were under the impression of like, okay, we're doing something for the community. We're doing something that's going to be fun for the kids. So if we build it, they'll come. That was kind of our impression. Like we're going to do something that's very unique. We had not seen it, in the context where we were at this point. And so we were like, okay, we build it, they'll come, and it's going to be awesome. Well, that's not exactly what happened. I mean, we bought the property. First of all, we had a lot of issues with our grader and contractor, and as you can imagine, being whatever the mileage is, 6,000-7,000 miles away, whatever that is, we were we were somewhat taken advantage of. It wasn't in a terrible way, but we certainly were taken advantage of, like you could imagine. That was one issue that we had to overcome. And, for me, I'm like, okay, we raised all this money to do this project. I had a stewardship sort of mentality to the money that we raised. Like we needed, maximize it and take care of it. And yet we're having issues. And so it got really, for me, the first year was pretty difficult just because I was like, we might have bitten off more than we can chew. And I don't know how this whole thing's going to play out. And so there was a lot of, moments where it was up in the air. And then once we finally did get it almost to completion, we started doing some of our programs. We started bringing in some of our coaches, and we just had like two or three coaches, and they were working with kids, and it was a very light program. We started getting resistance from the parents and the people in the community, and they were like, "Who are these Americans coming in here, and what are they trying to do with our kids?" And all this kind of stuff. And so, we had to have like town hall meetings, so to speak, with the community, and just say, here's what we're trying to do. This is the big picture. And we let our Ugandan guys, the people that were helping us handle that. That wasn't an American conversation that was going to go well. So we let those guys, those guys were bought in, and they were invested in the vision that we were presenting. And so we're like, okay, you guys communicate it to the community and let them know what's going on. And so it was a slow start from that, a lot slower than we thought it was going to be. But we've been in this community, this one particular community where we started. It's 12, 13 years now, and they love us. Like, it's been a huge win for the community and for us, and for the kids and the people who've grown up in it, and those kind of things. It's been a huge win. But we certainly had some rocky starts, at the beginning, and I didn't know, none of us knew how it was all going to play out. Certainly, we pulled it up and just shut it down, but and kind of moving to the next step.
You got super choppy there. Okay, maybe you're back.
Sorry.
Did you say they were going to shut it down?
No, I said we could have gotten to the point where we just were like, hey, let's just shut this thing down
Okay.
and go home. We didn't get to that point because every time it was almost like we had like one more morsel in front of us that we could kind of grab onto. And then
Yeah,
we
that
kept
makes
going
sense.
and kept going. And then we got kind of over the hump, and then we were in a good spot.
How long did that pushback from the community last? Was this like a week thing and then they explained it and everybody was okay, or is this like a very prolonged thing? And did you end up going to meet some of these people that were initially very skeptical of this? Like, did you ever have those conversations with them when you traveled over there? And what were those like the first time that, so you've got your kind of, we'll call them emissaries, kind of
Yeah,
communicating for you to a certain extent,
right.
but like when you meet them, how does that go? Are they already kind of turned around, or are they still like, okay, these people told us this one thing, but we want to see what this guy's got to say?
Mhm. I never sat like in a group meeting like that and had a conversation. That was always our Ugandan staff that was handling those. To answer your question, I don't know. I can't remember exactly. Maybe 6 to 9 months, kind of like a little bit.
Mm,
The tension was kind of high. I think there was some wait and see from the people. And then when I was there and the people I did meet, it seemed like everybody was fine. Like, it seemed like, and they were meeting an American for the first time, and they, were shaking my hand and be glad, they were glad that we met. So I don't think they were ready to air all their grievances, at the first meeting. So most of the issues were kind of like behind, kind of, the word on the community was such and such. And so the guys would know that because they were living in this community. And when I say the guys, the Ugandan guys who were helping us and things like that. So most of those conversations were dealt, with our staff. And like I said, they were bought into the vision. They wanted to see it become a reality. And so they're instrumental in us, kind of navigating that process. And like I said, we wouldn't have any clue to know, how to really do that in their context.
yeah. You mentioned you've been in this one community for 12 or 13 years now. So I would guess that you've built some level of relationship, or at least seen some of the kids from like 5, 6, 7, and now they're adults now. Like, what has that been like for you personally? Like when you go back, like what kind of feelings do you get from that? Like, what are these people doing like within the community to like, are they're carrying on? I would guess because it's been such an integral part of their life. But for you, is
Yeah.
that kind of like you're like, yes, this is why we did it?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a kind of a full circle moment a lot of times. So now we have, just to give you some overview,
Hmm.
um, we have 11 operating campuses, in and around Kampala, which is the capital city of Uganda. So 11 campuses that are operating, and then we've got two under construction. So we got 12 and 13 under construction that'll be open probably first quarter of next year. Um, so now the operation has expanded. We're throughout a lot of different communities. But this one specific community is still where when we take groups of people over and we take trips over there, we always go to the same community, which is where we started. So we have spent a lot of time there, gotten to know the people over time there as well. We have had a number of maybe 10 to 15% of our staff are people who actually come through our programs as kids. So they've just been impacted, since they were 8, 9, 10 years old, all the way up to adulthood. And now, they're working with us in our programs. And so we really look at from an American perspective, like our job is to kind of just build as strong of a coach army, so to speak, as we can. So we're really focused on like leadership development, staff development, and like just people development within our staff of these guys who are 25 to 35 years old. And so we invest a lot of time into them. And so now that some of those kids who have gone through our program are now, our coaches and our staff, like we get more, time with them, just because that's our focus is to build up our staff. So it's really cool just to see them and understand their stories and what they've experienced, as kids going through our program. And then now they get to kind of, execute that with kids in the community that are younger than them. And certainly that's like I said, a full circle moment for us because like, okay, this is what we wanted from the beginning. Like we wanted to create this cyclical investment back into the community from the community members. And that's what's going on, with our guys. So that's been pretty cool to see.
Did after the first one kind of was relatively successful, did it make building the next ones easier in terms of like yeah, they're in the same city, but it's different parts and
Yeah.
like for people in the US, there's different parts of different cities, different suburbs or whatever. Like did it make it easier? Did word kind of spread like, oh, these guys built this thing and we actually really like it?
Yeah, for sure. It was a test case. It was a model, that people could actually tangibly see and look at it and to know and just kind of see what we were doing, how we were operating it. Um, so yeah, we went into the city and we started, just picking little communities in there and thinking, uh, you know, we, you know, we've now learned demographically kind of where we need to go and how we can go. Because the big thing is, one is like how many kids can we reach? That's one thing. But then also like, is it going to sustain itself financially? And so you kind of have to pick a community that balances that. It's still going to produce revenue, but it's also going to have enough kids in the community to connect with. So we've learned that over the years, but apart from that, yeah, it gave us a lot of confidence, and the more we've done, obviously, the more we kind of have figured it out. It's almost like a franchise model where they really nail like the demographics. Okay, we know if we go to this demographic, this thing's going to be successful. We've gotten a lot more of that than we have, just guessing and shot in the dark.
Yeah. If a parent over there was gonna say, yeah, what is my kid getting out of this? Like you mentioned role models and the soccer obviously being kind of the mechanism for what you guys are doing. But aside from playing soccer, what do they like what's the goal?
hmm Yeah, I mean, the goal is to, you know, number one, to just, we want to create an environment where the kids feel safe, they feel loved, they feel included. And so we do that. The coaches that invest in them, like it's really their full-time job. I mean, they do the soccer programs and do all that kind of stuff. That's fun. But their main focus is, the child and focusing on the child and really from a holistic perspective in terms of like their whole life. So it's not just like they come on a Saturday and do a program and then they leave. And when our coaches walk in these communities, they walk around, they do different things. People are like, hey, coach, hey, coach. They're just known as like a coach in the community, which is really cool because it gives them a level of respect. It gives them a level of leadership in the communities. And so, and then another big thing that they do with the children is they spend time at their school. So during the lunch hour and things like that, they'll go to the school, they'll have like one-on-one or two-on-one conversations with some of the boys and some of the kids in the school. And they're asking them questions about their grades and their goals and their future dreams and hopes and things like that. And so, And so really it's just like someone to just invest in them, holistically. Obviously we have values that we go over and we talk about in terms of, like their courage and their hardworking and their discipline, and like a lot of the values that we even can pull out of a soccer game or a soccer match or whatever. We can pull those values out and then put them into life lessons. And so, so there's a lot of value based, investment there, but then also just holistically in their life and how they operate, and navigate the complexities of those cultural challenges that they have. A lot of these kids are growing up without dads in the home, some without moms or dads. And a lot of these kids just, as you can imagine, they start to build up resentment, animosity, anger, and they don't know how to release it. They don't know how to properly handle some of the things that they're feeling. And so for them, our coaches, who've grown up in similar contexts and they've kind of wrestled with a lot of these things and they're older and they've dealt with a lot of the things that have made them successful. They can put that down on to the kids and say, okay, well, when I was your age, I was able to do this, this, and this, and just kind of navigate life and the hard things that kids are dealing with over there, and it's been pretty fruitful to see them execute it.
Yeah, creating a community, I think there's been several studies, or I think generally speaking, like if people feel a sense of community, that generally helps with happiness more
Hmm.
than material possessions or other things of that nature. Um, so that is, I think, such an understated part that for me, kind of listening to your answer, I was like, okay, so they're just kind of there, and then I was like, oh no, the community building is the important piece there. Because some people would look at that and say, well, like, are they building schools or like educating them? It's like, well, it's just soccer. It's like, well, that's not really what the point of it is. The point of it is the community building and breaking cycles
Yeah.
of kind of the resentment, like you mentioned. And I don't know, the whole world could do with more of that, to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So um, okay, so you mentioned you've got 11 campuses, 12 and 13 on the way, and you've kind of taken a step back from the nonprofit. So what's the vision for the nonprofit? Is it other countries? Are you going to stay in Uganda? Where, like, are you hoping to expand? Like, I know I've got a couple friends. I mentioned this to you, I think, before, that are going to do a similar sort of camp around digital literacy and soccer in Nepal.
Hmm.
Um, the Stat Lobo guys, go watch their episodes. Desh and Ian, go pay attention to what they're doing as well. People listening, they're great guys. But there's a lot of people doing kind of similar things. So for you, are you kind of, maybe satisfied is not the right word, but sometimes you have a business or a goal or a plan, and like you found your niche and like you excel in that one thing. And other times is maybe a more optimal option to try and expand it elsewhere. Where do you guys fall on that?
Yeah. So going back when I first started, I really this vision really was birthed, but between myself and another guy that I mentioned earlier, who was a friend who was kind of helping me process this. His name's Tom Carson, and so he actually came on board after about 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the timeline. So I was the only employee, kind of leading the charge, and then he came on board, and then we were both, here. And from the get go, our design was to be like we want to be Ugandan led, and we want to be less reliant on Americans and more reliant on Ugandans. And so since then, we really don't have any. We have one other employee, but it's really just a couple people over here on the U.S. side of things. But so he took over when I left to go back into real estate. He just took over the executive director position, and he's been leading the charge ever since then. And he's been the one instrumental in all the growth that we've had over the last few years. But he and I have had conversations for probably the last 6 or 7 years, just about like how many can we do in Uganda? Like how many of these, you can't put a bowling alley on every corner of every, street. And, so so it's kind of one of those things. We felt like 20 was the number. We kind of just pulled that out of the air. We're like, okay, if we can do 20 of these, in Kampala. We think we can do it. I think that's going to make a pretty significant dent. If you look at the number of kids that we've impacted even now, we're pushing close to 20,000, you know, kids who've been impacted through our programs or involved in different ways and things like that. So we're like, okay, if we could double that, triple that, whatever, that would be amazing. And then even just the investment we make into our staff, you know, we've got 85 coaches now, so we are influencing them in a lot of different ways. And so as we continue to maybe double that, we could have 150 staff. Like that's a lot of people in Kampala that are kind of subscribed to this idea that we can make a difference in the next generation by you know, by doing what we're doing. So so that's kind of where we are. We haven't really we kind of talk about it every once in a while, but we haven't really thought about what's after that. We feel like we're really only about a $3 million capital campaign away from exercising or kind of realizing that 20, you know, campus vision. We're not that far away. Although that's a lot of money, but in some ways it's not.
Yeah.
And so so we need to be thinking about that. But for us to go to a different country, you know, all the things I mentioned earlier about the learning curve, meeting the new people, finding how to purchase land, it would be a tough thing for us to go and just try to do again. And now we're older and like, you know, do we have the energy and the desire to do that? I don't know. However, I do think there's people in some of these countries that know how to do all those things. And can we partner with those people and kind of just share like, okay, well, here's kind of what we do. You go do it. You know, can that be successful or franchise is a bad word, but could we package up like, here's what we do, here's how we do it, here's the lessons we've learned, package that up, and then hand that off to someone in a different country, different culture, different context, and then they kind of adapt it based on how they do things. I think certainly that would be probably the more likely avenue of growth, and just as it, you know, goes to different places. But those are just some of the thoughts we've had
Yeah.
recently.
That seems fairly doable if you've got kind of a blueprint for success at this point. Do you guys have like scholarships or things like you sending any of the kids to like school in America or Europe or anything? Like they get good grades and you'll pay for a, I don't know, what like scholarship programs or anything like that?
Yeah, we've done it occasionally in country, never international outside of Uganda. So maybe a better school or different school. Some of our kids, you know, because of their athletic prowess or whatever, there are schools in the country that'll offer, you know, especially like high school boarding programs.
Hmm.
They'll offer some educational money there. But it's been really cool to see, like, you know, we'll find out like, you know, one of our coaches has been paying the school fees of a kid in on his team, and we never even knew it. Like it was, he didn't mention it, he didn't, you know, broadcast it. He was just like felt a desire to use his own money or whatever to pay for kids. So that's been really cool to see some of our coaches exercise that. But yeah, I mean, occasionally that'll come up. I mean, with so many kids and all the, you know, this, we can't obviously do for everyone that we wish we could.
No, of course.
But certainly we've gotten we handle those cases for sure.
What was the moment then that you were like, okay, yeah, it's time to step away from this? Was there one moment, or was it you kind of like, oh, I would like to get back into real estate, or how did that sort of work itself out? Because I can also imagine there's some sort of emotional attachment to the work that you've been doing. You go back and travel, and you haven't seen this kid, and now he was 7 when you first met him, and now he's 14, and it's like, oh, you've grown so much, and then like you're not doing it anymore. So, like, was that difficult for you to step away, or like what was the cause for that? And then kind of walk through well, I guess I don't really know the life change of what you were doing, right? Within one sector, you're kind of it's a very niche thing that you're doing, and you've got to work on these set of skills where it's like, okay, yeah, we're talking to people overseas, we're on different time zones, we're talking with people that are 6,000 miles away, and now it's like, okay, I wake up and the guy is also at 9 a.m. and he wants to do a deal on some sort of like office building or whatever the case may be. It's like, so walk through like kind of what was the moment, or was there a moment that you knew it was time to step away, and was it difficult for you, and then the adjustment back into kind of real estate
Yeah.
life?
Yeah, I think it was actually similar to going into it. It was gradual, and I think there was a lot of factors. I mean, the fact that, like, like I mentioned, Tom came in, and we were working together, and I felt like he had a really good handle on, pushing it forward. He had a clear vision of what he wanted to do, and those kind of things. So that was helpful. I think we both kind of realized like there's really no need. Like we're not really, both of us are not needed necessarily to do this. But ultimately, I think I just kind of missed the business side of things. Um, and I started along the way. It's actually part of my story with real estate was, I was working with commercially. And then when I started doing the nonprofit, I started investing for myself and thinking to myself, okay, if I am in this nonprofit role for a long period of time, I probably need to figure out some sort of side hustle slash, plan to help myself. And so started leveraging what I knew about real estate to just buy, I was buying single family houses and rental properties and things like that. And I started getting a lot of questions from people that I knew about how to do that and what that looked like. And people were asking me to help them. And so I started seeing the writing on the wall there where it's like, okay, I see a path forward if I wanted to get back into real estate that I could, help as an agent from an agent capacity or even just a coaching capacity to help people navigate, helping them build, a rental property portfolio. So it all kind of just came together and it became a natural thing. And it was slow. It wasn't a decision that I made overnight. And I also knew I'm always going to be connected to the organization. Like I'm always going to be connected to the nonprofit. And what it allowed me to do ultimately was I can kind of keep my one foot in business and do that and kind of keep my satisfaction there. And then I can also just kind of pick and choose the things I really enjoyed about the nonprofit and just focus on those. And that was really just engaging people into the organization, whether that be a trip over there or just a conversation. And then also, the development of our staff. Like I was real passionate, still am real passionate about developing our staff to be just like great leaders in the community and those kind of things. So I wanted to focus on those two things. And so those are some of the conversations that I had with Tom. Is like, okay, if I'm going to pull back, let me still focus on these two things. And I can give part of my time for that, but then I can also give part of my time for real estate. And real estate allows me to do that. Like it gives me the flexibility. It's not a, hard and fast 9 to 5, clock in, clock out kind of thing. So I have a lot of flexibility from that regard, and it's allowed me to do that.
You mentioned kind of building up the staff and the leadership coaching and things of that nature. Did you, well, I guess just talk to that a little bit, because there's some things that I think are for somebody who kind of has the temperament or the skill set that you do is kind of common sense. Like, okay, you need to build a connection, you need to do this, and you need to do that. But from there's also a reason why leadership kind of classes and coaches are so um, coveted. Good ones are. And I was speaking with oh, I'm gonna forget somebody that we've spoken about this on the show multiple times. But it's like, what makes like a good leader? Because you can say something that is from the textbook, and you can get like the leadership textbook, and you can not get a good vibe. Like you can be like, I still don't want to listen to that person. Just because they
Yeah.
said the words doesn't mean that they're leading me. So was this something that you developed over time, or was this something that you kind of just naturally fell into with the real estate? Like it was a good fit for you, like just how you were, and then you were able to kind of harness it and use it. And then the follow up to that is teaching it to somebody else is different than doing it. You can know like that you're good at something, but then that to actually teach it to somebody else is like you have to have a deep understanding to really be a good kind of teacher of whatever the subject
Hmm.
matter is. So how was that kind of for you?
Yeah, I think the big thing with the leadership stuff, for them over there, and as we kind of facilitated the conversations, was, and I can't remember the exact quote, but you hear it said like, no one cares what you know, or what is this statement? Like no one cares, something about like no one cares what you know until they know you can be trusted. I mean, that's a total terrible interpretation of the real quote because I think it kind of rhymed or it had some kind of quirkiness to it. But but the reality is like, in my real estate business, if I'm going to work with a client, especially, real estate's kind of it's a personal thing. You're talking about finances, you're talking a lot of things, and someone has to feel confident and they have to feel like they can trust you for us to really even kind of work together and for them to allow me to lead them through the process. And I think in a lot of ways that's been the same with our guys over there, and they've seen the commitment we've had. I mean, the not only financially the commitment that we've had in the communities and the different things, but the time that we spend over there and the trips that we take and the things that we've done for them in terms of their leadership and their personal growth. And so they've seen that commitment. I mean, now it's easier because it's 12 years of us, being committed. I can assure you early on there was a lot of like questioning and like, do we trust this guy and those kind of things. And so your leadership's going to be limited based on that, trust level. But now we built up so much kind of relational equity and trust with among the guys and the staff. And honestly, we really do care about them. Like, it's not like, you can be in a business and you can have staff working for you and it's about the bottom line and production and those kind of things. For us, it's never been about that because we don't have the bottom line necessarily. Like we don't have the financial piece to it. So it's always been about the person and connecting with the person and like understanding, where they came from, their story, understanding their relationships, whether it be a spouse or kids or whatever that they're going through. And then just kind of, using that as a launching point to speak to their lives and different principles. I mean, we certainly have books and things like that we've utilized and read with those guys, and things like that. But now we kind of just evolved more towards like principles and some of those kind of things, that we speak, mostly to them with. And now they're, especially the guys who've been with us these 10, 11 years, 12 years, whatever, like they're doing that with the younger coaches and having those conversations with them. But there is a lot of, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of trust within our organization, at all levels, whether it's us or the layers below us. I think there's a real genuine care for each other. And I think that helps, build those leadership lessons a little easier.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's always built on trust, 100%. I think, and like, I can't think of an example that is not in terms of leadership, or good leadership, anyways. Switching gears slightly, well, you mentioned it a little bit because we're kind of, I guess we're going in chronological slightly, a little bit. Um, the real estate coaching stuff, have you had some, I don't know, maybe tips or pointers that you've gathered over the years for people that are trying to get into like a real estate investment type situation or some rental properties or things like that? What are some of the um like, I don't know, doesn't have to be a number, but the biggest things that you've learned or the biggest pieces of advice like that kind of generally speak to no matter what the situation is that you've learned across your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting, and this won't be a surprise based on the conversation we've had, but I kind of I feel like the more people I've talked to that have done or been successful in real estate and kind of built like a significant real estate portfolio, there's two qualities I feel like I've recognized in these people. Um, One of which is the ability just to take action and be decisive. Um, and you think about the context of like, for some reason, I had no fear about going into Uganda and just buying a piece of property like that. I don't know if that's bad,
It
that
seemed to work out.
bad decision making on my part. But when I was convinced that this was what we were going to do, then it became easy for me just to be decisive. Like, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is where we're going. Let's go for it. And I think in real estate, it's the same way. Like you kind of just have to make a decision. Like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I see young people, especially, who want to get into it. And honestly, I just feel this way, and I could be, I could be proven wrong. there's very little to lose and just to going for it and experiencing it and going through that first deal or that first property or whatever it may be. You can always sell it. You can always back out. There's things you can do. But where I've seen people have a lot of success is those guys who are just going to be like, okay, I'm just going for it. I'm going to take the plunge and let's do it. And to really have that conviction for like, not to say that let's do it. And then when things get hard, let's don't do it. But it's like, let's do it. And I'm willing to persevere a little bit of uncomfortable situations to make sure that this is actually seen through. So I think that's the big thing is just like take action, be decisive, let's go for it. I have that, I think, naturally in a lot of ways. It's like if I feel convicted about something, I'm just going to do it. And then the second part is, and this is more of a growth area that I've had over the years, but relationships, like be relational. Just like we had to go in Uganda and like figure out, build relationships and things like that. That's really kind of what you do in real estate when you're investing. I mean, you've got to work with agents and contractors and property managers and different people like that. And the more wins that those people on your team can have, like if you're if you're working with an agent and they get a lot of transactions, or you're working with a contractor and they do a lot of work for you, like the more wins and the more relationally you can build those relationships, like that's when your home run deals are going to come, because they're going to go out there and start finding deals for you and like helping you navigate, especially if you're in a market that you're not living in or you're not familiar with. It's those relationships, and which is a lot similar to what we experienced in Uganda. So I feel like, taking action and being really, really committed to building relationships will really, the educational stuff, the knowledge of real estate is not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. And the path has been laid out for us for hundreds of years in America, where people have invested in real estate exactly the same way. So there's not anything really new under the sun. It's just, you know, follow the path, take action, be relational, and I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm going to say you got a 90% chance of success if you do those things.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Um, I think, let's see. Let's do, actually, you know what? Let's do the other question that I didn't ask earlier. And it's kind of related oh, it disappeared. Hold on. What advice would you give to like your 16-year-old self if you could go back in time?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things maybe, but it wasn't until I was mid 30s that when I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book that
Hmm.
the light bulb went off for me of like, maybe everything that they tell us about finances and all this kind of stuff, is tilted a little bit towards the financial industry. Um, and maybe there's a different way. And so up until mid 30s, and when I read that book, the idea of like me investing in what I would call like a cash producing asset, which is real estate, would not have been like necessarily on my radar, even though I was in that industry, like I was doing that work for other people. But it still never registered to me. I looked at my job as a W-2 employee and like I'm just getting an income. And so, my son's 17, he's going to be 18 next week. And so these are the principles like I want him to understand, like, you can go that route, you can go the equities route and invest in the stock market, 401k and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say don't do that. If you want to do that, go for it. But also explore this other side of things of like, what if you put all your money into a rental property, and what does that look like? And how does that look over the course of 20, 30 years? If you're 18, now all of a sudden you're 48. When this loan is paid off, you've got a 30-year loan, and now you own this asset free and clear, no loan. It's worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars. What if you had two of those, or you had three of those, and five of those, 10 of those? Like that can be significant wealth. And so, I say all that to say, like, I wish I would have started sooner. Like, I wish I would have started in my 20s. I think I could have, um, I feel like I've done pretty well, but I feel like I could have done better.
Does it snowball like after you get the
Oh
first
yeah.
one? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's really like, the compounding of real estate is significant because you're leveraging the bank financing. So you have very little of your money invested, maybe up to 20% of the property invested, but it compounds as if you own the whole thing. And so you've got, so once you start having multiple properties and they're all compounding and then they're all growing, like that makes a huge difference. So it does compound pretty significantly.
That makes sense. If the people are interested in learning more about whatever, like the real estate coaching that you're doing or the nonprofit, where should they go to find you if they're interested in supporting? Where should they go look? Is there any
Yeah.
place in particular? And then give all those, and obviously to those listening, the links will be down in the description. So if you didn't catch the full URL or whatever, it's fine. It'll be there for you.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's simple. It's if you go on LinkedIn, you can just search Scott Bowen Real Estate and you can find me. From there, you can link to Champions United, which is the nonprofit. You could even LinkedIn on LinkedIn. There's a profile for Champions United, championsunitedfc.org. So .org, championsunitedfc.org is where you can find out more about that nonprofit and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, those two places, that'll take you anywhere and everywhere you need to go and learn more about me. But I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's kind of my main avenue.
Sounds good. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Well, I just appreciate the time. I appreciate what you're doing for the community that you're nurturing over there, and I appreciate you having me on. And if I can be an assistance to you or the podcast in the future, just let me know.
Will do. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And
Yeah.
for you guys listening, go check the links out in the description. And as always, we will see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.